The story begins with a boy blushing, his hand clutched tightly to his chest. Despite knowing every detail about the game, he was sure of one thing. The girl in front of him was his favorite. She was Alexandra of Chevalier, the game's heroine he loved most. She stood with a gentle smile, gazing at him with soft, puppy-like eyes. The world around them came from a game called Engage Hazard, a chat-based RPG filled with romance, comedy, and adventure. In the game, players could meet cute girls and distinct heroines, each with their own charm, and aim to win their hearts. The main objective was to become king by marrying the best fiancé in the world. But the boy wasn't the game's main protagonist. Instead, he had become Harold Well de Halvas, the third prince of the de Halvas kingdom, one of the strongest nations in the Western lands. Harold was known for being dishonest, pitiful, and easily manipulated by the powerful. He was the worst of the worst, famously called the incompetent villainous prince. The boy realized he had turned into Harold when he woke up that very morning. As soon as he opened his eyes, memories of his past life rushed back. It felt like something out of a reincarnation manga. His previous name had been Tachibana Haru, a quiet college student who didn't have many friends and struggled to connect with people. He spent most of his time playing games. That's how he discovered Engage Hazard. Despite pouring lots of money into the game, he was now trapped in the world as Harold Well de Halvas, the worst character in the game. In the original story, Harold grew jealous of the game's main hero and ended up starting a rebellion. However, it failed, and Harold was executed. The boy didn't want that outcome. He soon realized he was now only 13 years old, and the main events of the game wouldn't begin until he turned 16. That gave him 3 years. Since he already knew the entire plot, he made up his mind to change his future. He vowed to survive, and even save a girl who was meant to die in the game. Later, Harold wore an outfit he thought looked ridiculous. He asked the nearby maids for their opinion, but they just smiled awkwardly and said it looked fine. He didn't believe them. To him, the clothes looked silly. In his past life, he always wore black, so he felt uncomfortable in bright colors. He told the maids to bring him something black instead. When they returned with a black outfit, he put it on and decided that this would be his usual attire from now on. Not long after, he remembered he had a meeting to attend, so he hurried off. Just as he was about to leave, one of the maids stopped him and handed him a handkerchief. That gesture triggered a short flashback. He remembered finding a girl crying in a closet. He had given her a handkerchief and told her not to cry anymore. When she smiled at him, he thought he should have asked for her name. Then someone called out to him, and Harold quickly ran off to the meeting. Not long after arriving at the meeting, Harold was greeted warmly by his father, the king, who said it was nice to have him there. Harold simply apologized for being late. Then a girl stood and greeted him. Her face sparked a memory. In the game, Alexandra was the daughter of the Duke of Chevalier, the most powerful noble in the de Halvas kingdom. He also remembered she was one of the main heroines, though her combat skills were weak, even though she appeared early on. In the game's main storyline, she was called the Frozen Princess because she often acted cold and distant toward the other girls. Many players didn't like her, and she usually ranked last in popularity polls. If the player didn't pursue her route, she and her father would be executed for trying to start a rebellion. Still, Harold liked her the most. On one specific route, there was a single short line where she said she wished the main character would notice her. That simple moment stuck with Harold. Because of it, he decided not to be a villain in this world. Instead, he wanted to live and save her. Alexandra seemed confused when she caught Harold staring at her, so he quickly apologized. His father laughed, saying Harold must have been charmed by her beauty. Then he invited them both to a tea party. During the tea party, Harold noticed the silence between them. He realized he had to grow closer to Alexandra, or things could go badly. He called her name, but she answered coldly. Admitting he hadn't been a good prince, he guessed she didn't think highly of him either. He then told her that if she wanted to end their engagement, she could, since he probably wasn't someone worth marrying. Alexandra looked surprised and asked what he meant. Harold raised his voice slightly, saying he only needed 3 years. In that time, he vowed to become someone she could be proud of. His words clearly caught her off guard. Then, kneeling down on one knee, he said that if after those 3 years he still wasn't good enough, he'd ask the king to cancel their engagement himself. He asked her sincerely for a chance. She was quiet for a while before saying she understood, and that she would decide for herself whether his feelings were genuine. Alexandra called for her maid, Monica, who brought over a sword and shield. Harold was confused. Alexandra then said she would attack him with all her strength, and all he had to do was block it. Harold thought it was too much. But when he voiced that, she gave him a serious look and said if he couldn't handle that, then maybe his words meant nothing. Left with no choice, Harold accepted and picked up the sword and shield. Alexandra blushed and thanked him. Harold did his best to stay calm. He figured blocking a single strike wouldn't be too hard. But when Alexandra moved, her speed caught him off guard. Her strike was so powerful that it made him cough up blood and collapse. She walked up and stood over him as he lay there, stunned and confused. That's when he noticed something odd. Her eyes were glowing red. He suddenly remembered that this never happened in the original story. She told him that his determination had been seen. This left Harold even more confused. Then she giggled and said she was looking forward to seeing how he would change over the next 3 years. Her words filled Harold with happiness, and he thanked her. She blushed, stepped into her carriage, and waved as she left. After the carriage pulled away, Harold found himself blushing too. He felt like this was the first step toward a better future. He promised to do his best over the next 3 years. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Alexandra's face was bright red. She couldn't believe what she had just done. She had admitted to falling in love with him from the moment they first met, and that they were now officially engaged. She felt it had been worth it to secretly arrange the engagement. Her maid said she understood Alexandra's happiness, especially since things with the prince were going smoothly, but also reminded her to act more like a proper lady. Although the engagement had gone well, Alexandra insisted she deserved a bit of leeway. Since her maid knew how she truly felt, she was surprised to see just how red Alexandra's face had become. Alexandra glanced at herself in the mirror. The maid pointed out that Alexandra's face had also turned red for a moment during the duel. She warned that if Prince Harold ever found out the reason her eyes turned red, it could end their engagement. That made Alexandra nervous. She didn't want to lose him. The maid advised her to be more cautious and said she could have at least smiled and tried to be a little more friendly when they first met. Alexandra quickly replied that her maid already knew that was impossible. The maid understood that Alexandra struggled with socializing and wasn't as outgoing as people expected her to be. Alexandra knew that too. She was aware she didn't seem very approachable. She thought about the things people said about her behind her back. Some called her a villainess, while others just saw her as cold. The maid was still amazed that Harold managed to block her lady's attack. Alexandra explained that she had used the dragon's favor in that strike. Harold was able to block it by adjusting to the way her sword moved and changing where the blow landed. That helped to spread out the force and made it easier to defend. She gave a soft smile, thinking Harold didn't even realize how impressive that was. In her mind, no one could ever be a better match for her than Harold. After all, he had once helped her escape the palace by handing her a handkerchief. And that small moment had meant a lot to her ever since. At the same time, Harold was trying to figure out what to do next. The world he was in had a battle system, and if he entered a fight now, he was sure to lose. He felt stuck. Even though he had asked Alexandra for 3 years to prepare, the truth was his stats were a mess. His magic attack and magic defense were high, but all his other stats were really low. His magic element was dark, but strangely, all his skills were light-based, which didn't match well. His physical strength was also poor. The only good thing was that he had the maximum number of skill points. While Harold had potential, the real challenge was how Tachibana Haru would develop him. So, Harold decided the first thing he needed was a weapon. Not long after, a maid walked into the room and said she would be serving him from now on. She introduced herself as Marion Cialer. Her face showed clear annoyance as she looked at him. Harold was caught off guard. The maid standing before him was actually another heroine from the game. In the original story, she was supposed to work under someone named Wilfred. She bowed and said Harold could rely on her if he needed anything. Feeling a bit tense, Harold thanked her as she turned to leave. She muttered under her breath that she was unlucky, then quietly shut the door behind her. Harold started reflecting on himself. Maybe he only acted proud but quickly gave in to people with more power. He was known as the incompetent villainous prince after all. Being treated like this wasn't pleasant, but it allowed him to stay out of the spotlight. That way, he could avoid attention and quietly live with his fiancée, which was all he really wanted. He also thought that in 3 years, This maid might still end up working for Wilfred. He just hoped he wouldn't suffer too much by then. There was something the game never revealed: Harold's past. As a child, he had always been compared to his successful older brothers. Unlike them, he couldn't use the royal family's special crest and wasn't as talented either. Still, he kept trying his best to catch up and earn his parents' approval. But his mother once told him that if he couldn't even fill in for the first prince, then he should at least avoid holding him back. Those words stayed with Harold and left a deep scar in his heart. A week later, Harold woke up and asked his maid for a wash basin so he could clean his face, but Marion didn't answer. He realized that even though she had been working for him for a week now, she still wasn't doing her duties properly. He started to feel like she was being openly disrespectful. After that, he headed to the training area to practice. While swinging his sword, he thought about how much time he had spent training and how little progress he had made. In the game, characters could level up easily, but this world was different. Here, people had to train their bodies intensely to grow stronger. Still, Harold felt stuck. He wondered if using a magic weapon might help. He remembered that some rare weapons came with special powers. In the game, anything ranked R or higher had unique abilities. Some even allowed the user to cast magic. Maybe if he practiced with one of those, he could learn magic too. But before that, he knew he needed to build a stronger body. It would be useful in emergencies, so he kept swinging his sword, determined to keep going. Just then, Marion showed up and let out a small laugh. She teased Harold, saying he hadn't improved much. He replied that he was just copying someone with no real talent. Hearing that, Marion gave him a sharp look and said she'd help train him because she believed he did have talent. Harold thought about it. Even a heroine like Alexandra, who was considered weak in the game, had hidden strength. Marion came from a family of knights, so she was probably even stronger. If he could train with someone like her, maybe he could grow stronger too. He asked if she was really okay with teaching him, and she agreed. They got into position, and Harold attacked first. She quickly pointed out his weak guard and struck him, knocking him off his feet. With a serious look, she said he really lived up to his name as the incompetent villainous prince. She added that everyone had already given up on him. She asked if it was frustrating being looked down on by a maid. Harold admitted he was weak and lacked any special abilities, but because of that, he didn't want to give up. He remembered how easily he gave up in his past life and didn't want to repeat that mistake. Determined, he stood back up and attacked again. Suddenly, another maid appeared, stopping Marion by holding a dagger to her neck. The new maid introduced herself as Monica Ashton. She said she was now Harold's personal maid starting that day. Harold was shocked because Monica was supposed to be Alexandra's maid. Marion was also surprised and said she hadn't heard anything about it. Monica told her to check with the head maid and wished her good luck with her next job. Marion left, saying to wait. Monica explained that once Harold married her lady, she would follow them as her maid. That's why she came ahead of time to get used to serving Harold. She held out her hand and said she'd take care of him. Harold took her hand. A short while later, Marion returned, clearly upset, asking why this was happening to her. Monica calmly explained that she had reported Marion's rude behavior toward Harold. Because of that, Marion was no longer allowed to stay near him. Marion stormed off, saying she would never forget this. Harold felt confused by everything. Monica suggested they return to his room so she could treat his wounds. After she helped him, Harold felt a bit happy. She was the first maid to show him real kindness. He didn't exactly want to call Monica, but he did it anyway. However, she seemed too busy searching the room for something. She said that since Harold was at that age, she figured he might have hidden items that boys his age usually kept. When she couldn't find anything, she assumed he must have hidden them elsewhere. Harold told her there was no other place to hide anything. Then she offered to get those items for him if he didn't have them yet. This made Harold embarrassed, and he told her not to do anything unnecessary. Even so, he said he'd rely on her from now on. Monica nodded and asked him to rely on her too. The next day, while Harold was eating, Monica entered and told him his brother, Cardus, had invited him to dinner that night. Harold felt a bit annoyed, but then remembered his past life. He used to work hard to gain his mother's approval, and that meant acting like he got along with Cardus. He figured Cardus probably knew Harold was just pretending, but now it didn't seem to matter as much. So he told Monica to let them know he would attend dinner later. At the training grounds, Harold was practicing hard like he usually did. It had been some time, but he still didn't feel like he was making progress. On top of that, he had already made a promise to Alexandra. When he opened his eyes, he noticed Alexandra already standing there, watching him. She told him she was thankful for his effort. Harold was caught off guard and blushed as he asked why she had come. Alexandra reminded him it had already been a month since their last meeting. Since they were engaged, she said they needed to see each other more often. Otherwise, people might begin to gossip. So instead of waiting, she decided to come see him. Harold realized he hadn't considered that. Alexandra told him directly to be more considerate next time. Even though Harold had vowed to become someone worthy of her, he couldn't believe he'd overlooked the most important person, Alexandra. He knew he had to take the initiative, even if it made him nervous. Then he remembered that the Chevalier territory was far from the capital. But Alexandra explained that she had moved into a townhouse nearby after their engagement. That surprised Harold. She also said that if he wanted, she could come visit him any time. Harold didn't know how to respond. He hadn't expected her to go so far for him. He began to wonder if maybe she had some feelings for him, even if just a little. But then he quickly reminded himself not to get carried away. After all, it was only their second meeting. Then Alexandra noticed that Harold was only practicing sword swings. Harold quickly blamed the weather, not wanting to admit the real reason. He was training so hard just to earn her approval. He wished he could say that out loud, but he felt like no one had ever truly seen his efforts, either in the past or now. Alexandra then mentioned something from a month ago, which confused Harold. She said she knew he was working hard to keep the promise they made. Hearing that, Harold finally opened up. He admitted he had no special talent, but he was giving it his all because of that promise. He added that he still needed to become stronger if he wanted to stay as her fiancé. Alexandra looked a little sad and asked if she could help him train. Harold was surprised and said that it sounded like a dream. He explained that everything he was doing was already for her. Alexandra then asked if he thought she wasn't good enough. Harold quickly denied it and held her shoulders. He told her that he was training for himself, so he couldn't let her teach him. He also said he would feel bad for taking up her time. Alexandra laughed and reminded him that she was his fiancée, so he didn't need to worry about that. Harold blushed and thanked her, noticing she was blushing too. Then she stood up and said it was time to train. Harold was caught off guard. She picked up a sword and said that since he had blocked one of her attacks before, he should be able to do it again. She told him to get ready while he stood there in confusion. Once more, she told him to prepare himself. After some time, Alexandra said she would come back the next day because it was getting late. Harold remained where he was, still shaking and unsure of what had just happened. Alexandra reminded him that they only had 3 years left, so they couldn't afford to waste even a single day. Harold wondered if she really meant it. Those 3 years would be difficult, and if he didn't grow stronger in that time, his future as Harold might end up just as hopeless as it had in the game. Alexandra then told Monica to take care of him. Monica said she would tend to his wounds and help him rest so he'd feel better by morning. She intended to be very hands-on, but Alexandra warned her not to overdo it. Monica then urged Alexandra to leave, reminding her that Harold had been invited to dinner and would be late if he didn't go soon. Alexandra looked annoyed. No one had told her anything about the dinner. Monica playfully teased that Alexandra wasn't invited anyway. Alexandra said she wanted to go since she was already here, but Monica said no right away. Before Alexandra left, she called out to Harold and told him to let her know what happened at the dinner when she got back. Harold agreed. After she left, he quickly got ready. When he finally arrived at the dinner, he said, "Sorry for being late, but someone told me they had been waiting for me." That someone was his brother, Cardus Well de Halva, the kingdom's first prince. Thanks to his talents, Cardus was already active in national politics and considered the leading candidate to become the next king. Still, he remained distant, showing no kindness or emotion. Armed with the powerful de Halva's crest, he stood as a major obstacle to the story's protagonist. To him, Harold was nothing more than a worthless younger brother. Even so, Harold kept following him, hoping that one day Cardus would acknowledge him. He thought that if that ever happened, their mother might finally pay attention to him. But deep down, Harold knew it was just a dream. One day, Harold nervously asked why his brother had suddenly invited him to dinner after such a long time. Cardus replied that it was to celebrate Harold's engagement to the daughter of the Chevalier ducal family. Harold suspected that Cardus just wanted to use the engagement to gain favor with the Chevalier. After all, they were the strongest noble family, and with their support, Cardus's path to the throne would be much easier. But this time, Harold had no intention of going along with his brother's plan. Just then, Cardus's maid leaned in and whispered something to him. Looking slightly annoyed, Cardus called for someone outside to enter. A handsome young man walked in, smiling as he congratulated Harold. It was Raphael de Halva, the second prince. Although he seemed friendly, he was clever and calculating. He had no desire to become king but held a grudge against the first queen for how she treated his own mother horribly, the second queen. Because of this, he opposed Cardus, the first queen's son. Since Harold was seen as useless, Raphael didn't appear to hold anything against him. Cardus didn't believe that Raphael came only to offer congratulations. Raphael jokes, asking what kind of secret plan he could possibly have. He pointed out that Harold was marrying the daughter of the powerful Chevalier family, and added that he wanted to find a partner as well. But Cardus responded bluntly, saying he had already heard from the king and queen that Raphael had once proposed to the Chevalier family, and been turned down. Harold was surprised to hear that. Raphael admitted it was true, and joked that if he had known things would end up like this, he would have tried harder. Then he teased Cardus, asking if he also wanted to marry the same girl and offered to back off if Cardus was serious. Cardus said he could do that. Listening to them talk about their fiancés like they were nothing more than tools made Harold upset. He stood up suddenly. The other two asked what was wrong. Harold said he wasn't feeling well and politely excused himself. He apologized for the effort they had put into preparing the dinner. As he walked out of the dining room, Harold realized that even what he once believed to be normal had shifted after regaining his memories. He knew that this kind of behavior was considered acceptable in this world. Still, he didn't want to be the kind of man who used women as tools to succeed, even if that meant going against this world's logic. In the game, Harold had hurt Alexandra, his favorite heroine, just to win his mother and brother's approval. He couldn't let that happen again. He decided to fight against fate, not just to stay alive, but to ensure the person he loved, Alexandra, would never have to look sad again.